47 dashboards. That's the number that hit me in the face during an audit at a mid-sized financial services company. They'd poured about $3.2 million into BI over 4 years. And what did they end up with? Dashboards everywhere. 6 different platforms. 3 different teams maintaining them. Some updated daily, some weekly, some, whenever someone remembered. So I asked a simple question: how many of these are actually used to make decisions? And you know that moment when a room goes quiet, not because people are thinking, but because everybody knows the answer is going to be uncomfortable? That happened. After we dug in, the real number was 7. Maybe. The other 40 were still alive in the system, still refreshing every night, still burning compute, still showing up in inventories. But no human being was actually looking at them. No board meeting got smarter because they existed. No manager made a different call because a tile changed from green to yellow. I call those dashboard ghosts. Built for a one-time meeting. Built to answer a question someone asked 2 years ago. Built for a compliance checkbox that later changed. And nobody ever came back to shut them down. And here's the thing. That company wasn't some outlier. It's closer to the norm. A study in 2025 looked at enterprise BI deployments and found the average organization maintains around 3.4 dashboards per knowledge worker. Let that sink in. Per person. And about 2/3 of those dashboards are opened less than once a month. Even the ones people do open. Fewer than half are credited with influencing a real business decision. So what have we built? We've built these massive cathedrals of visualization. Beautiful charts, clean filters, impressive drill downs. And yet we're starving for intelligence. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that this whole season is going to revolve around: data isn't information. Information isn't insight. Insight isn't intelligence. And intelligence still isn't the same thing as a decision. A lot of organizations have mistaken the first step for the finish line. They built pipelines, declared victory. They hired analysts, assumed intelligence would magically appear. They rolled out dashboards and expected decision quality to rise like a tide. It didn't. Today we're going back to basics. What is intelligence, actually? Why do organizations with more data than any generation in human history still make decisions that aren't any better? And what does it really take to go from reporting to decision-making? I'm Nakel Nikiema, and this is the Intelligence Edge. Welcome to Season 1. Alright, let's get into it. I've got a panel with me today, for people who've lived this problem from 4 different angles. Dr. Lian Zhou is an AI and analytics transformation expert across Asia-Pacific, and she's seen cutting-edge companies, still stuck at surprisingly basic intelligence gaps.
Thanks, Nakel. Honestly, I'm happy we're starting here. This is the conversation everyone needs before they buy one more tool.
Maria Alvarez is a data governance leader. She's the person who walks into a messy environment and turns noise into something that can actually support decisions.
Glad to be here. And yes, I'm excited to talk about the difference between having data and actually being able to use it.
Jonas Richter joins us as a data ethics and compliance specialist, and he brings what I think is often missing: the human side. Trust, interpretation, behavior.
Thanks, Nakel. If intelligence doesn't land with humans, it doesn't matter how perfect the model is.
And Kwame Mensah is an intelligence systems architect who's built systems across multiple continents, including environments where you cannot afford waste, so you learn very quickly what delivers value and what doesn't.
Happy to be here. And yes, if you don't have the budget for dashboard sprawl, you learn to design for decisions from day one.
Let's start with definitions. People throw around data, information, insight, intelligence like it's all the same thing. Dr. Zhou, set the hierarchy for us.
Sure. Think of it as 4 levels, stacked. Each level depends on the one below it. Level 1 is data. That's raw facts. Numbers, text, timestamps, locations. Like, 47. Or, March 15th. Or, San Francisco. By themselves they don't tell you anything. There's no meaning yet. And the reality is most organizations are not short on data. They're flooded. Every click, transaction, sensor, event log, everything generates data. The real question is never, do we have data? It's, what are we doing with the flood? Level 2 is information. That's when data gets context. You connect data points and suddenly it answers a basic question like, what happened? So, 47 units sold in San Francisco on March 15th is information. That's dashboard territory. Most dashboards live right here, contextualized reporting. And that's also where most BI programs stop. They build impressive machinery to answer, what happened, and then they act like the job is done.
Right, like the dashboard existing is the win.
Exactly. But then you need level 3, insight. That's information plus implication. Insight answers, so what, and, why does this matter? For example, sales in San Francisco fell 23% on March 15th compared to last year, and it breaks a 6-month growth streak. Now we've identified something meaningful. Something unusual. Something that should trigger attention. Insight requires analysis. Not display. You have to know what normal looks like before you can spot abnormal. And level 4 is intelligence. That's insight tied to action. It answers, what should we do? So, that sales drop lines up with a competitor promotion. We should match it within 48 hours to reduce share loss. Now you've crossed into intelligence, because it's connected to a decision and a response. And that level is rare, because it demands everything underneath, plus judgment about what matters and what action is appropriate.
Maria, if that's the latter, where do most organizations slip?
Between information and insight. That's the gap I see constantly. They do the infrastructure work. They have the warehouse, the lake, the pipelines. They can refresh reports. There's a dashboard for everything. So they think we're data-driven. But insight requires a different muscle. You need people asking, what's important here? What changed? What's weird? What's the pattern? And here's the brutal part. In many companies, everyone's job is to consume information. Almost no one's job is to synthesize it into insight. So the work falls into the cracks.
So you get a lot of output, very little meaning.
Exactly. And the dashboards multiply because every question becomes another report instead of an improved understanding.
Jonas, explain this gap from the human angle. Why is it so hard to move from, here are the numbers, to, here's what they mean?
3 reasons, and they're all painfully human. First is cognitive load. Executives and managers are overloaded. If you hand somebody 47 dashboards, the most rational response is to ignore all 47. So you get this paradox where information abundance creates attention scarcity. More data can literally produce less insight because people can't absorb it. Second, interpretation isn't consistent. The same chart means different things depending on the function. Sales sees opportunity. Finance sees risk. Operations sees stress. Without shared interpretation, the organization doesn't align. It fragments. Third, action requires confidence. To go from this is what we see to this is what we do, you need trust. And many leaders don't trust the numbers. They've seen conflicting metrics. They've been burned by reports that didn't reconcile. So they fall back on intuition. Sometimes intuition is excellent. But if you're relying on it because the system isn't credible, that's a system failure.
Kwame, if we now look at the system itself, why do so many environments produce information but not intelligence?
3 architectural gaps show up again and again. First, context isn't baked into the system. You store transactions and events, but you don't store what normal is, what the benchmark is, what happened last time. So analysts spend the majority of their time just recreating context, pulling prior periods, finding baselines, defining comparisons. If 80% of your time is context rebuilding, you don't have a scalable insight engine. Second, significance isn't surfaced. Dashboards tend to make everything equally visible. The critical signal is sitting right next to a vanity metric like they're the same priority. An intelligence system should do the opposite. It should rank, filter, highlight, and basically say, pay attention here. Third, decisions aren't connected. Reports live in one place. Decisions happen in meetings. Actions get executed in another tool. And outcomes show up later, somewhere else. If there's no trace from insight to decision to action to outcome, the system can't learn. It just keeps delivering information into a void.
Let's name the beast here. The dashboard trap. Lots of visibility, not a lot of better decision making. Dr. Zhou, how did organizations end up trapped like this? Because nobody set out to build dashboard graveyards.
No, it usually comes from 3 reasonable assumptions that turn out to be wrong. First, we confused access with action. BI democratized data, and that's real progress. People can query, build dashboards, explore. But we assumed that if people had access, they'd automatically make better decisions. That's like giving everyone a library card and assuming it turns them into experts. Second, we measured BI success the wrong way. We measured tool adoption, dashboard counts, query performance, data volume. Those metrics reward producing information, not improving decisions. And third, we underweight the human element. Intelligence depends on judgment, what's important, what's meaningful, what action is appropriate. We built systems optimized for data flow and expected people to just adapt.
Maria, when you walk into an organization that's in the dashboard trap, what does it feel like on the ground?
It's weirdly predictable. I see the same symptoms show up. 1. Dashboard proliferation. Every new question becomes a new artifact. Nobody retires anything. So the inventory grows forever and value doesn't. 2. Metrics conflict. Sales and finance have revenue dashboards that disagree. Then nobody trusts either one. 3. Analysis paralysis. There's always one more cut, one more filter, one more segment. Data becomes the excuse to delay. 4. Reporting as ritual. The weekly report exists because it's always existed. It takes days to prepare and minutes to skim. And 5. The Excel shadow universe. Despite huge platform spend, major decisions still get made in spreadsheets because people don't trust or can't use the official tools.
Jonas, what's the human impact? Because we talk about dashboards like they're harmless, but there's a cost, right?
There's a huge cost, and it's mostly invisible until it's too late. Analyst burnout is real. Imagine spending your week building reports that no one reads, maintaining dashboards nobody uses, responding to low-value requests. It's demoralizing. The best people leave. The rest get cynical. Decision-makers get frustrated too. They've been told for years, be data-driven. They want to be, but their tools don't help them decide. They just give them more to look at. And then there's what I'd call learned helplessness. After enough disappointing BI initiatives, organizations start to believe it can't be fixed. We already tried analytics. That mindset is brutal because it makes the next attempt harder.
Kwame, suppose you had a clean slate. What would you do differently from day one?
I'd flip the design approach. Most teams start with data and hope decisions improve. I start with decisions and work backward. Principle 1, decision first. Identify the decisions that matter. Then ask what intelligence would improve them. Then what insights feed that intelligence. Then what information, then what data. Principle 2, build for action, not presentation. If an output doesn't tie to an action, you should question why it exists. And principle 3, close the loop. Track whether an insight led to a decision, whether the decision led to an action, and whether the action produced an outcome. If you don't close that loop, you can't learn and you can't improve.
Okay, we've diagnosed the dashboard trap. Now I want to turn the conversation toward the positive. What does real intelligence look like? Dr. Zhou, if a listener is thinking, fine, but what am I aiming for? Paint the picture.
Real intelligence looks different than a dashboard, and it has specific qualities. First, it's decision-specific. Information says, here's everything about sales. Intelligence says, here's what you need to decide whether to expand into the Northwest. It does the relevance work for the user. Second, it's timely. It arrives when the decision is being made. A brilliant analysis that shows up after the meeting is basically trivia. Third, it's actionable. It doesn't stop at description. It offers options. It frames responses and trade-offs. Fourth, it's trustworthy. It explains where it came from, and it comes with confidence levels. It's verifiable. And fifth, it's connected. It remembers what happened last time. It ties today's recommendation to prior decisions and outcomes. That's where learning begins.
Kwame, what do you need under the hood to make those qualities real? Not just an aspiration on a slide.
There are 4 system elements I'd call foundational. 1 is a decision registry. A real catalog of the key decisions, what they are, who makes them, how often, what inputs they need. Most organizations can't list their top decisions clearly, which is why intelligence becomes generic. 2 is a context engine, an automated way to provide baselines, benchmarks, historical patterns, and, last time we saw this, comparisons. That's the stuff analysts spend most of their time recreating manually. 3 is a recommendation framework. This is where you translate analysis into options. Not just, here's what's happening, but given this pattern, here are realistic paths and likely outcomes. And 4 is outcome tracking. Capture the decision, capture the action, measure the result. That's the feedback loop. Without it, intelligence never gets better.
Maria, when people hear governance, they often think rules and red tape. How does governance actually enable intelligence instead of slowing everything down?
Governance can be a blocker if it's purely about policing data. But intelligence-enabled governance is different. First, it's decision-centered. Instead of only defining data elements, you define what a decision needs. What thresholds trigger escalation? What confidence level is required to act? What counts as acceptable evidence? Second, you tie quality to consequence. Not every dataset deserves the same governance intensity. The data driving a $100 million decision needs a higher standard than data driving a minor operational tweak. Third, you create accountability for outcomes. The question isn't just, is the data correct? It's, did this intelligence improve the decision? That shifts governance from compliance to impact.
Jonas, trust keeps coming up. In plain terms, what makes intelligence trustworthy to humans?
For things. Transparency. People need to see where it came from. Which data, what logic, what assumptions. If it's a black box, they may comply once, but they won't trust it. Track record. Trust is earned over time. If the system can show, here's when we recommended X and it worked, trust climbs. Acknowledged uncertainty. This one surprises people. Intelligence that admits uncertainty is more believable than intelligence that pretends certainty. Humans know the world is messy, and human oversight. Systems that support judgment are trusted more than systems that try to replace it. People want assistance, not a takeover.
Let's get practical with a capability roadmap. Dr. Zhou, you've talked about a stack, layers organizations need to build. Walk us through it.
I see 5 layers, and they build upward. Layer 1 is the data foundation, infrastructure, integration, quality, governance. Necessary, but it doesn't automatically produce intelligence. Layer 2 is analytical capability, the ability to analyze, model, visualize, predict. This is where you start turning data into insight. Layer 3 is decision integration, connecting analysis to where decisions are made, in the right format, at the right time. This last mile is where many organizations fail. Layer 4 is outcome learning, capturing what happened after decisions, measuring results, learning from the gap between expectation and reality. And Layer 5 is strategic alignment, prioritizing intelligence work around strategic goals and proving value in language executives and boards care about. The problem is most organizations invest heavily in Layer 1, somewhat in Layer 2, and barely touch Layers 3 through 5. So the stack is upside down. Heavy on data, light on intelligence.
Kwame, can you map that to the real tech and operational pieces people recognize?
Sure. Layer 1 is your warehouses, lakes, pipelines, catalogs, master data management, data quality tooling. The maturity test is simple. Do you know what data you have and where it is? Layer 2 is BI platforms, statistical tools, ML frameworks, NLP, visualization. The maturity question becomes, can you move from what happened to what will happen to what should we do? Layer 3 is workflow integration, alerts, decision capture, recommendation engines, even natural language generation. The test, do insights reach the decision maker at the moment they can use them? Layer 4 is your A/B testing, attribution, feedback loops, model monitoring and retraining, outcome measurement. The test, can you prove whether the intelligence improved outcomes? Layer 5 includes portfolio management and value measurement systems and strategic planning integration. The test, are you investing in intelligence based on strategic importance, and can you demonstrate ROI?
Maria, what does governance look like across those layers? Because that's where a lot of companies either overgovern the bottom or undergovern the top.
That's exactly right. Layer 1 governance is classic, definitions, quality standards, access controls, lineage. Most organizations at least understand what they should be doing there. Layer 2 needs model governance, validation, documentation, bias checks, performance monitoring. Layer 3 needs decision governance, and this is where it's often informal. What decisions require what approvals? What thresholds trigger escalation? Layer 4 needs outcome governance, how you measure impact, how you attribute outcomes, how you store learning so it doesn't disappear with staff turnover. And Layer 5 is strategic governance, prioritizing investments, measuring value, aligning intelligence work to strategy. That's executive responsibility, but it still needs structure.
Jonas, add the human capability angle to that stack. Who do you actually need, beyond, we hired some data scientists?
This is where many organizations have a blind spot. Layer 1 needs data engineers and stewards, people who build and maintain foundations. Layer 2 needs analysts and data scientists, methods and modeling. Layer 3 needs decision support specialists, people who can translate analysis into decision context. These are hybrid business and analytics roles, and in many organizations they barely exist as a defined career path. Layer 4 needs outcome analysts and performance managers, people who measure what happened and feed learning back into the system. And Layer 5 needs strategic planners and executive partners who can prioritize intelligence as a strategic capability, not a reporting function. We've trained lots of engineers and scientists. We haven't systematically built the roles that connect intelligence to decisions and learning.
Let's do a reality check. If someone listening is thinking, do we have this problem? How would they know? Dr. Zhou, give us warning signs that an organization is generating data, maybe even information, but not intelligence.
I'll give you 10, and if people are honest, they'll recognize a few. 1. The dashboard count rises every year, but decision quality doesn't improve. 2. Analysts spend most of their time prepping data instead of analyzing it. 3. Leaders keep shadow systems, spreadsheets and offline trackers, because official systems don't meet their needs. 4. If you ask what decisions B.I supports, the answer is vague. Visibility. Transparency. Not a list of decisions. 5. Reports are produced but not discussed. If a report doesn't create conversation, it's not intelligence. 6. Leaders ask the same basic questions again and again even though dashboards exist. That's a sign the dashboards aren't answering what they really mean, or what to do. 7. Analytics is treated like a cost center, not a value driver, because it hasn't demonstrated measurable impact. 8. High tool investment but low maturity. Shiny platforms, basic outputs. 9. Analytics teams are far from decision makers. No proximity, no context. And 10. Nobody knows if previous decisions worked. If you can't trace decisions to outcomes, you're guessing repeatedly.
Maria, if you were brought in to diagnose an organization, what assessment would you run?
I'd look at 5 areas. First, decision inventory. List the top 20 recurring high-impact decisions. For each one, who owns it, what data or intelligence is used, whether outcomes are tracked. If you can't do this, that's already telling. Second, map information flow. How does data become something a decision maker sees? Where do bottlenecks happen? Where does context drop out? Third, user experience research. Interview decision makers. What do they actually use? What do they ignore? What do they wish they had? What do they not trust? Fourth, outcome audit. Pick a few major recent decisions and trace what intelligence informed them, what action was taken, what outcome occurred, and whether the intelligence was accurate or helpful. And fifth, capability assessment across the full stack, foundation through strategic alignment, so you know whether you have symptoms, root causes, or both.
Jonas, I want you to give leaders some uncomfortable self-questions. The kind that cut through the "we're data-driven" story.
Alright, 5 questions. 1. When did data actually change your mind? Not confirm your view, change it. If you can't recall a recent moment, your system isn't operating as intelligence. 2. What decision would you make differently if you had better intelligence? If you can't name a decision, you may not be thinking concretely about what's missing. 3. Do you trust the data enough to follow it when it makes you uncomfortable? Trust isn't when it agrees with you. Trust is when it disagrees and you still act. 4. How do you know your analysts are effective? Not hardworking, effective. Do they improve outcomes? And 5. If the analytics team disappeared tomorrow, would decision quality drop? Would anyone even notice? The honest answer tells you a lot.
Alright, final segment. Tactical edge. Concrete actions leaders can take this week. Not a transformation roadmap, not a 5-year plan. What can you do in the next few days to start moving beyond dashboards? Dr. Zhou, you first.
Identify the 3 most important recurring decisions in your organization. Not the biggest once-a-year bets, the recurring decisions that shape outcomes week after week. For each one, ask, what intelligence informs it today? Where does that intelligence come from? Is it systematic or ad hoc? This reframes everything around decisions instead of data assets.
Maria.
Do a dashboard audit. List every dashboard and recurring report that's actively maintained. For each one, ask, when was the last time it influenced a specific decision? Not, it's good to know. A real decision. If you can't name one, it might be a retirement candidate. And pruning matters. It frees time and money for intelligence that actually changes outcomes.
Jonas.
Ask your analytics team one question. What should we do differently based on what you've learned recently? Not what did you find? That's information. Ask for action. If they struggle, that's not an insult. It's a signal you're not set up for intelligence. And the question itself starts to shift behavior.
Kwame, close us out.
Pick one recent decision, something concrete. Now trace it backward. What information informed it? Where did that information come from? Was it produced systematically, or did people scramble the night before? How long did it take? How many tools were involved? That single trace exposes your real intelligence process, not the process you think you have.
This is the start of the season, and honestly, it's the start of a bigger shift. Over the next 12 episodes, we're going to build a full framework for organizational intelligence, how you create a system that consistently makes decisions better, not just reports prettier. We're going to talk about the decision layer, the missing connective tissue between insight and action. We'll quantify intelligence debt, that hidden cost of delayed decisions and poorly informed ones. We'll get into ownership, who actually owns intelligence in modern organizations. We'll talk culture too, how to balance evidence and intuition without turning data into a weapon. We'll redesign how intelligence reaches executives and boards. We'll tackle silos that fracture knowledge. We'll separate prediction from prescription, knowing what might happen versus knowing what to do about it. We'll get into real-time response when speed matters. We'll build systems that measure outcomes, not activity. We'll talk ROI in language that earns investment. And we'll give you a maturity model so you can see where you are and what the next step really is. But it starts with this recognition: data isn't intelligence. Dashboards aren't decisions. And for all the money we've spent on business intelligence, a lot of it hasn't produced much intelligence at all. That's not an indictment. It's an invitation. The data exists. The technology exists. What's missing is the design philosophy, the organizational capability, and the discipline to focus on what actually matters, decisions that improve outcomes. Dr. Lien Zhou, Maria Alvarez, Jonas Richter, Kwame Mensah, thank you for kicking off Season 1 with me.
Thank you, Nakel. This is where the real work starts.
Can't wait for the rest of the season. If we fix decisions, everything changes.
Let's make intelligence something people actually trust and use.
Looking forward to building the bridge from insight to outcome.
And to you listening, thanks for being here for episode 1 of The Intelligence Edge. Next week, we introduce the decision layer, the part most organizations are missing, and the part that turns analytics into action. Until then, I'm Nakel Nikiema. Make better decisions.